I was the greatest card player in the history of card playing, and I won $3 million in 3 days. He handed me a knapsack with $1 million in cash in it. As a gambler, I was the biggest egomaniac on the planet. My shit didn't stink.
Carton was the voice New Yorkers woke up to, until the morning they woke to the news that their favorite loudmouth had been arrested. He built one of radio's most beloved shows, fell into the jaws of a gambling addiction, and went to prison for the lies he told trying to outrun it. But he came back.
Prison stripped away my ego right quick. You're butt naked, bent over, and they're checking your rear end for contraband. You learn literally overnight who your real friends are. I still don't know why I stopped, because my wife and my children were always the most important things in the world to me. Like, my kids did nothing wrong. My kids and my wife were the 5 biggest victims of the bad decisions I made. I was an innocent kid who had his world wrecked at the hands of a grown man for no reason.
I'm Tim Green, and I have ALS. But this podcast isn't about ALS. I don't want you to feel sorry for me. I'm a father of 5, married for over 35 years, a New York Times best-selling author, an NFL first-round pick, and a practicing attorney. This is Nothing Left Unsaid, where my son Troy and I sit down with extraordinary people for raw, honest conversations about life, its toughest trials, and greatest triumphs. My voice in today's episode is powered by 11 Labs. Today's guest soared to the top of the country's largest sports radio market with a voice built for the back row and a wit that hit like a punchline. But behind the mic, he was running out of air. Carton was the voice New Yorkers woke up to, until the morning they woke to the news that their favorite loudmouth had been arrested. Carton's story is the full arc: fame, failure, and a second act he never expected. He built one of radio's most beloved shows, fell into the jaws of a gambling addiction, and went to prison for the lies he told trying to outrun it. But he came back, not just to the airwaves, but to his family, to honesty, and to a new purpose.
Thank you so much for having me. I've been a big fan of yours, as you know, over the years, having attended Syracuse after you. You still got me by a couple of years. And obviously know your story and watched your career both on the field and off the field. And it's a privilege and a pleasure to join you guys today.
And Craig, we're starting off nice and light. We're not getting anything too deep, it sounds like.
Yeah, here's our next guest. He ruined his entire life by being a jackass. No, it's interesting to hear other people comment on my life experiences, obviously. And what you said there in the middle is something that is very important to me, and that's how I've handled myself as a father, as a husband, as a man, at the lowest point of my life, and the decisions I made to continue my life, number one, and then in the manner in which I wanted to continue living my life. Because, like you said, I'd gotten to the pinnacle, of my chosen career, which is sports talk radio, and was very blessed to get to New York and have the success I had with Boomer Esiason for 10 years in New York City. And for some reason decided, no matter how hard I worked to achieve that, I was willing to throw it all away, and I did. And that's certainly a big part of my story. I'd like to think that the comeback and the manner in which I've lived my life and the right decisions I've made and how I use my story to help other people and pay it forward will at some point be at least on equal footing as the negative. But I also know that's not the way the world works.
It's the second act. I mean, it's like he said, right? You had your comeback, so.
Looking back at the kid in New Rochelle who dreamed of being on the air, what would he have thought about where the mic eventually took him?
As a young kid, like most kids growing up in the 70s in New York, the dream was to be the center fielder, for the New York Mets. And if I couldn't do that, play sports in some manner. And I had a certain amount of sports skills, obviously not nearly enough to live out that dream. But then when sports talk radio was created and it started at WFAN in New York City as a full-time 24-hour entity, the dream shifted. Like, if I can't play sports and earn a living doing it, well, how cool would it be to talk about sports and earn a living doing it? And there was no grand plan that that's what I want to do with my life when I was at Syracuse, but Syracuse afforded me the opportunity to dabble and to get some practice doing it. I did a little bit in high school because I was attracted to the notion of being involved and wanting a job in sports. But if you'd said to me at 10 years old that I would have gotten to the heights I got to in my chosen profession, I would have drug tested you. Which is interesting because I have 4 children, and my youngest is 14. And, as I'm sure you've done with Troy and your kids, you try to talk to them as a dad and, what do you want to be? What do you want to do with your life? And when I was 10, I had vivid dreams that I wanted to be Johnny Carson. And it had nothing to do with sports or sports talk. I vividly remember being a huge fan of Johnny Carson's when we were allowed to stay up late enough to watch him, which was usually only on Friday nights. And I was like, I want to be him one day. I wanted to have a late night talk show. I know I never got to do that. My career took me, into some pretty amazing experiences and places, which I would say probably got as close as you could possibly get to that dream job. So I would have been shocked as a kid, to answer your initial question, if I, it's like you grow up listening to WFAN as a teenager, right? It started back in the mid 80s. And to then become the most listened to voice in the history of that station, you couldn't have told me that when I was a kid. No way that could have ever happened. I still don't believe it.
What's the truest sentence you know about addiction, not in theory, but in your own skin?
Well, as far as being an addict, look, it's as a gambling addict, as a compulsive gambler, and I would say it's about addiction. I think there's a lot of commonality in addiction. I think the uniqueness is recovery. So let me start with the addiction part. There was a good period of my life when my story blew up and I had to come to terms publicly with being an addict, where there's a great amount of shame associated with that. And that's ego drives that shame. As a gambler, I was the biggest egomaniac on the planet. My shit didn't stink. I was the greatest card player in the history of card playing. I went to my wife at one point at the height of our radio success and said, I'm going to retire. And I didn't have the money to retire with. And she said, what are you going to do? You're not good at anything else. And I said, I'm going to be a professional blackjack player. That's the level of ego I had when I was gambling. That ego also was with me when I first started to come to terms with having a problem and my willingness to get help for that problem. Because who wants to admit publicly that they're an addict? I grew up like most kids in the 70s. You didn't show fear, you didn't share emotions, you didn't show weaknesses. It was this really kind of male chauvinist period of time growing up, and that's how I was raised. So I was never going to be the guy that was going to raise my hand and say, hey, guess what, everybody? I'm an addict. I couldn't control myself. And then once I started doing the work, and it's work, just because you decide one day, all right, everyone forgive me for what I did, I'm not going to gamble anymore. You got to put the work in to overcome the addiction. And I'm sitting here today in front of you 7.5 years without gambling at all, which is a great accomplishment for me. But in that journey, I went from dropping my ego, living my life in a much more honest fashion. And in doing that, I now own the fact that I'm an addict, and I'm not ashamed of it anymore. And there's a journey to get there.
I was listening to something where you were saying you were making and losing, depending on the night, like $1 million+ a night. Is that right?
Yeah, that was not every night, but enough nights. Yeah, I did my fair share of sports gambling, but my bugaboo is blackjack. And what
Yeah.
happened was when Boomer and I used to do a show every year from one of the casinos in Atlantic City, New Jersey. And everyone knew I liked to play cards. I was good at playing cards. If we had a Friday night game, you can't beat me. But, it's just something I enjoyed doing. And then there was one time where I said to Boomer, kind of flippantly, hey, if you give me $10,000 when we go down to the casino the next morning, I'll give you $25,000 back, which is a 2.5 times return on the investment, which is stupid to do. And you can't guarantee it, obviously, right? And normally when we would do our show from a casino in Atlantic City, at 6 o'clock in the morning, let's say 100 people were there to watch. Great. Because we built this up, that he was giving me his own hard-earned money and I was going to gamble with it and pay him back 2.5 times the money. For that one broadcast, we had like 1,000 people show up for it because they wanted to see, would I pay off the bet? And I had a good night that night. I got very lucky. I won the money. And the next morning I paid him off. And what that represented for me was unknowingly, people then started approaching me. People in New York who have wealth, who have disposable wealth, came to me and said, if you're that good at blackjack, what if I give you $100,000? Would you give me a buck 25 tomorrow? Sure. And what happened in a short period of time is I went from regular, responsible recreational gambling. Maybe I bet $100 on a hand, but now I'm coming into the casino loaded. And at the height of it, when you start borrowing that type of money, you wind up meeting bad people and people that may not be earning their money in a righteous way. And I met a guy in a street corner, a guy I did know surface level, no. And he handed me a knapsack with $1 million in cash in it.
Wow.
And for some reason, that didn't seem abnormal or weird. And I went right to the casino. And when you bring cash into a casino, they got to count it. Well, it takes a half hour to count $1 million in cash at a casino. And that's, the life I was living for about a year and a half. Crazy.
And I guess my kind of thought was you're thinking about retiring and becoming a blackjack player. At one of those highs, I'm glad you didn't pull the trigger and retire. I'm glad you stayed on the
My
radio.
wife was too.
Yeah. What stopped you when you were on one of those, great night?
Yeah, nothing stopped me. I didn't stop. It's a great question because, like I said, now that I'm fully into recovery and I feel very comfortable, I'm not going to gamble anymore. I'm not going to gamble today, which is kind of a mantra in GA. The last piece of the puzzle for me that I don't have the answer for you, and I don't have the answer for myself, is I still don't know why I stopped. Because my wife and my children were always the most important things in the world to me. And while I may not have acted that 24/7 when I was gambling, deep inside my soul, they're everything to me and always were. That never changed. And yet, even though they're the most important things in the world to me, I still risk their futures. I risk their well-being and, financial security. And then one day I just stopped. And that day for me, I went to rehab. I had a criminal case pending. And I thought if I went to rehab, two things would happen. I thought, number one, my wife would stop nagging me about being a compulsive gambler because she was on to me. She knew. And number two, I thought, again, ego talking, that if I went to rehab on my own accord, the judge would appreciate that. And the judge, if I was found guilty, would take it easy on me because here's a guy that acknowledges he has a problem. And look what he did before he was found guilty, right? And I went to rehab and I went, just kind of faking the funk. And I sat down the first day, and there's about 12 other men and women from all across the country sitting with me. And they go one by one, they each tell their story of why they're in rehab. Me being the new guy, I go last. And these other people, it was as if I had written a script of how I processed my gambling and all the money I was gambling, the way I processed it mentally and emotionally. It was like they read my script and stole it word for word. And one of the guys from Oklahoma, 22-year-old kid from Oklahoma, his addiction was $1 scratch offs. And yet he's sitting next to me. We have the same addiction. I'm betting $1 million. He's betting $1. And it was that day that I was willing to look in the mirror and say, if that guy processes $1 the way I'm processing my blackjack play at the absurd numbers I was gambling, then maybe everyone else is right. Maybe I do have a problem. And I'll never forget, I said to that guy, what made you come to rehab? And he told the story, which we're going to laugh about, but for him, it wasn't funny. When you do the scratch offs, you have that silver filament that comes off when you get the scratch off cards. He would, every Friday when he got paid, he would go to the local convenience store. He would buy a 6-pack of beer. He'd buy a couple Hot Pockets for dinner. And the rest of his paycheck went to $1 scratch offs. He opened up the door of his pickup truck to get back into the front seat. And the silver filament came up to his knees.
Oh my gosh.
Like, let that sit in for a second. And that was the day he realized he had a problem. So I said to him, when it came up to your ankles, you didn't think you had a problem? And he goes, no, when it got to my knees, I knew I had a problem. So what I did was, to finish the story, I come home from rehab and I still, because my ego was still driving me, I wanted to prove to myself that I could beat this on my own, which, it's like a manly thing to do, right? So I come back from rehab. I had $60,000 left to my name, and I had it in cash. I went to a casino. I brought 30 in the casino with me. I left the rest of the money in my car. And the test was, if and when I lose the 30, I'm not going to go to my car and get the money is sitting there. I want to prove to myself I had the willpower to walk away. And a blackjack hand came up, and it was a split and a double. And I convinced myself, you only play the game the right way. It's a mathematical game after all. And I can't play this hand right. So I went to my car, I got the money. I lost all the money. And that was July 1st, 2018. And that's the last day I've ever wagered. Because I realized that day I couldn't do it by myself.
This is the last thing about it. I swear I'll let us move on. But
Yeah.
we had Charles Barkley on the podcast, and he just was in the news not that long ago, but a couple months ago. The NBA players all came out with the point shaving and that stuff, and him and Shaq and their panel there were discussing, and they're saying like, oh, they've got a problem, they're addicted, and he said it's not that they're addicted, they're just idiots. He's like, they're just being, and obviously there's probably
well,
somewhere
you can be a compulsive gambler, but have the bankroll to not have a problem. That's Charles. Charles is a compulsive gambler. When I got in trouble, he was the first guy to call me because he could relate to what I was doing, not the criminal stuff. He could relate to the gambling stuff, which led me down the bad path. Charles tells a great story, and I've lived it, and I agree with him, where once you win a certain amount of money, it's unacceptable to win less. So, for example, when you win $100,000, a week later, if I'm gambling again and I'm up 85 and you should just walk away, it's a lot of money. But I won 100 last week, man. I can't win less than 100. And Charles tells a story that he was in Vegas and he was up like 300 grand and, lost it all and lost some more. And his buddy's like, dude, that's $300,000. It's more than I make in a year. Like, what are you doing? And one of his buddies, I don't know who, said to him, it's okay to walk away with 300 grand tonight. Even though you once won $1 million, walk away with 300. It's okay. And that was the similar thing for me, that once your wins got higher and higher, you start chasing that level of winning. And my best weekend ever was 3 days in the Bahama island of Bimini, which is the westernmost Bahamian island, about an hour by boat or airplane or, waterplane from Fort Lauderdale, Miami. And I won $3 million in 3 days. And I chased that win until I stopped gambling.
In the documentary Wildcard, you say you were living a lie for years. What did it take mentally, spiritually, emotionally to finally speak the truth out loud?
Yeah, it's a great question. The public humiliation came first. I was obviously a well-known public figure in New York, and my story played out on the front and back page of the newspapers. And I think the way I was able to get through it and process it was seeing the hurt on my kids' eyes and how I negatively impacted their lives. As you know, Tim, our goal as parents is to always protect our kids, no matter how old they are. When Troy's 40, you're going to want to protect them, right? That's what we do. It's our job. It's our number one job. It's our main job. And then be loving, loyal, good spouses. They come hand in hand. And when I saw the hurt on my wife's face, who was there every day in court during my trial, when I saw the hurt, my daughter turned 16 2 days after I was arrested. So you can imagine, for a young girl turning 16, what that moment and those 2 days were like, and how she couldn't celebrate her 16th birthday because her dad, who used to be Superman, is now the worst guy on the planet and might have to disappear from the family. And are we getting divorced and all the things that come along with it? So that was one of the most powerful aspects of this whole, journey for me. And then, seeing the hurt in my kids' eyes and knowing the hurt I caused them and the hurt I caused my wife and everyone that, cared about me and was loyal to me, I had to make a decision. It wasn't hard for me, though, only because I knew I felt I knew who I truly was deep down inside. I was raised right. I was raised with the right morals. I had street smarts. I threw all that to the wind. But, if you tell someone you have to really change your stripes and be someone you're not for the rest of your life, that's much harder, I think, than for you to look in the mirror and say, I need to get back to who I truly am. And critics be damned and haters be damned. I know at the core of my being who I really am. And the 18 months or 2 years that I was becoming this other person, which frankly was really based on my success on radio. It fed my ego. It made me think I was, a big celebrity and superstar, and I was going to live the life I thought a celebrity should live. I had a Sprinter and I had a driver and I had all these stupid materialistic things that fed my ego. But when I saw the hurt on my wife's eyes, and my kids' eyes, and no guarantee that I'd be allowed to be a part of their lives. No guarantee my wife would, give me an umpteenth chance to salvage our marriage and live in the same home and all those things. That hit me to my core, more so than even being arrested. Like being arrested is the worst day of my life for sure. But seeing the look on my family's faces, unfortunately, Trump's being arrested by a long shot. So I just had to dedicate myself to getting back to being who I always thought I really was, which is a good person, an honest person, someone that you would trust, someone that you'd be proud of calling a friend. And it doesn't happen overnight for sure. I've shared the story a few times. I contemplated not waking up in the morning, and almost carried through with that ideology. And grace of God for sure, and dear friends in my life who are there for me. I'm here to be able to talk to you today. I was never a very religious person per se, but I've become a far more spiritual person. Um, and I do think there's something else out there, whether it's a being, an entity, there's an energy of something that I firmly believe has looked out for me. Even when I was in prison, place you never want to be. There are things that happened to me in prison that I don't think ever would have happened to me without some type of divine intervention. And I'm very respectful of it.
Is there something that like if somebody had said to you maybe before you had gone like off the deep end, if somebody, let's say there's a listener right now and they're gambling and they can feel that their ego is telling them it's all okay, but maybe deep down they know there might be something going on. If somebody had said something to you, you said it was like an 18-month journey, 24-month journey. If somebody had said something to you like a year in that could have changed your mind, or do you think you had to kind of go through that whole cycle?
No, sadly, I don't. Because my wife hates gambling. And there are people in my life who knew I gambled. No one knew the true extent of it because, compulsive gamblers also become world-class liars and hiders of fact. But if you would come to me, let's say you're a dear friend, you're like, hey, bud, you're not acting the same, there's something off, you're gambling too much, what are you doing? I would have blown you off. I would have manipulated you and the conversation in a second to get you off that topic. I would have assured you I was fine. I would have assured you it's all great. And I would have moved on. So there was nobody in my life who could have talked me out of what I was doing. And to get to your point, in a very strange way, being arrested probably saved my life in many different ways. Either I would have borrowed money from the wrong person at some point, because I was certainly going in that direction. Because how many people have that type of money that I was looking to gamble with readily available in cash? Not a lot. And the ones that do, like I said, are typically not good people who don't mean you well. Career-wise, it was going to catch up to me. Like there was a point. So when I'm number one, right, on the radio with Boomer, a couple of our advertisers were local casinos, and I was gambling at all of them. And it's Mohegan Sun up in Connecticut. So for me, it was about, an 45-minute hour helicopter ride to get up there to play blackjack. And there was a point where I had a marker. I lost a bunch of money and I didn't pay them back right away. Now, normally, depending on what state you're in, and if you have a marker, which is like casino credit, you gamble with their money. If you lose, you got to pay them back. If you win, they pay off the marker first, you take the rest. So normally you have 45 days, some states it's 60, but just use that time frame to pay all the money back. If you don't pay it back, you're now shut off from every casino in the world from a market standpoint. You cannot borrow money to gamble. And I owed them a few $100,000. And the president of the casino called the program director at WFAN, concerned about me because I had this debt. Now that debt is nobody's business but mine. And I picked up the phone and I read him the riot act because my boss came to me and said, "Do you owe Mohegan Sun, $100,000?" And of course, I lied, and I was pissed about it, because I didn't want anybody to know what I was doing, and that's the way I lived my life. I didn't celebrate the wins, I didn't get mad at the losses. I was a loner and lived in this little cocoon. But it was starting to impact my profession because people like to talk. I'm not sure if I answered your question, but I went off on a tangent.
No, I think you did. I guess it's like if somebody was in a similar situation to you early on.
Oh yeah, sorry.
What would you say if saying something to them doesn't help? What should they do? Should they just go to rehab before they feel like they're all the way there?
So I spend, I'm blessed to do it every day of the week now, counseling compulsive gamblers. Families come to me. Unfortunately, the fastest growing segment of the population that's now gambling are 16 to 22-year-olds. High school kids are now gambling out of control. They have problems. Families call me. They reach out to me because they know my story. If you'd come to me, I would have lied. I would have gotten you off the case. We wouldn't have even had the conversation. So it is frustrating when a family recognizes they have a kid in need. How do you reach the kid? I'm in a bit of a unique position because they all know who I am. They've watched, Loudmouth or Wildcard, pardon me, on HBO. So they may have seen my story, and I can talk to the kids, the young adults that I'm talking to from a position of experience. They can't bullshit me. Whatever they did, I did times 100. I know the lies. I know the stories. I know when you're BSing people. I know you're not being honest to your family about how much money you lost or wagered. So I can talk to them in a manner, unfortunately, their family can't because their family never did it, right? Even with that, the first thing I encourage someone who's got a gambling problem to do is to self-exclude. You can go online right now. It takes all of 2 minutes, and you can prevent yourself from gambling online. It doesn't help you if you have a bookie or an illegal gambling site. But for all these young kids now that are gambling legally, in which you have to be 21 in most states, they're still kids in my eye. You can go online, literally push a couple buttons, and now you've prevented yourself from wagering online. If a guy's not willing to do that, because it literally takes 2 minutes to do it, then I can't help that person because they're not ready to stop gambling. And they might feed me all the BS in the world and tell their family they're sorry and this is the last time I'm going to borrow money from you and all the things that we all do and did. If they're not willing to do the easiest thing, then I know for a fact, no matter what I tell them, even if they stop for a week or a month, they are not in recovery. They are going to gamble again. And I'd say doing this, by the way, and counseling kids gives me a much greater appreciation for what I put my friends and family through, because I get frustrated now talking to a kid that's gambling, knowing that he's not going to stop. Yeah. So I get the frustration now.
Craig, not to keep bringing up the bad stuff, but shame has a strange silence to it. What did your silence sound like at its loudest?
Oh, what is my silence? Well, it's evolved for sure. It's funny. I don't know how, Tim, you were when you were a broadcaster as a player, but it's hard for me to be that same person 24/7. So when I'm off the air, when I'm not on a microphone, I'm the complete opposite. I'm more of an introvert. I'm very quiet. I don't speak all that much. And my quiet is really based on an amazing amount of insecurity. Partially the way I was raised, the relationship I had, with my parents certainly fed that. Going into a profession, as you well know, as an athlete and broadcaster, which is one of the most insecure professions on the planet. Level of success that we've both reached is not the norm. It's the anomaly, unfortunately. There's always the next young broadcaster or athlete coming to take your place. So I've gone into a world that's steeped in insecurity. So my dark place, my quiet place is always trying to figure out where it's coming from next, trying to be over prepared, for the next move. So in my head, I'm playing chess all the time. I'm trying to see what's going to happen before it happens so I can be best prepared for it. So I have a lot of self-talks. Once in a while, it's out loud, which is strange for sure, especially when I'm going on, long walks or something like that. But yeah, my quiet time, even with all the success I've been blessed to have had, is really based in insecurity. It's trying to remind myself Look, there's a reason the radio station's bringing me back for a third time. There's a reason Fox wanted to be in business with me. There's a reason I have all these great opportunities to do things because people believe I'm good at what I do. But even with all the success, even, what, 13 combined years being number one in New York City on the radio, I still approach my job every day with the mentality of being new at it. And I think that's one of the things that's led to my long-term success. I've done this. I graduated Syracuse in 1991. So I've now done this for 34 years. And in 34-year span, I've only been unemployed for 3 months, which is awesome. And I think the reason I've had success, I have whatever innate talent God gave me for sure, but it's that I never got lazy. And one of the things that pains me now about watching other people do what I do, what my craft is seeing the laziness involved. And no one puts the work in anymore. Or people aren't willing to go to Buffalo, New York and make $12,000 a year and literally live in a retirement home so I could start my career. Or go to all the places I've gone and the things I've done professionally in my life, the chances I've taken. I come in even today, a 1 hour show. I came in prepared to do it. I know what I want to accomplish in every show. And while it's all unscripted and off the cuff, I still, I handwrite my notes. I know the things I want to get to. And it pains me when I see other people that just don't do that and don't have the respect for the job to do it. It's also why I'm still employed, 34 years later, because I put the work in. And I think that's very important to do that. And that's where my brain goes. That I got to do a show tomorrow. Every other aspect of my life, the quiet time, as you ask, is all about, would that be good on the air tomorrow? So if I see something, experience something, talk to someone, would that be fodder for content tomorrow? And that's just how I live my life.
You've described your gambling as a disease of escape. Escape from what?
Yeah, that's more of a loaded question for me. No, I have talked about it. It's a fair question. So, as a compulsive gambler, it's not the rah-rah stuff you see in the movies or TV, 20 guys at the craps pit, celebrating. I lived in a cocoon, and it made me feel safe, protected. The outside world couldn't get in. I didn't want attention. I didn't want people to see how much I was gambling. I just wanted to be alone in a room with a dealer, a drink or two, maybe something to eat, and 6 decks of cards in front of me and money in front of me. So it was an escape from. It was an escape from a lot of things. It was escape for me from some childhood trauma that I've never discussed or really dealt with. It was escape for me from, I guess you'd call them demons that live rent free in my head, which is part of that insecurity I was talking about. It was an escape for me from real life. It was an escape from success. It was an escape from having to be Craig Carton and, on all the time. And it just unfortunately provided a safe haven for me from all that stuff. In doing so, it led me down this bad path. So it was kind of like the angel and the devil on my shoulder, at the same time. But, for me, it was never about the money. The money's an ego thing. I had access to money, so I grabbed it and did it. It was about the need to play, because as long as I was focused like this on those cards, and I have a mathematical brain, which is why I like blackjack, and I could concentrate on the numbers, and the outside world didn't exist, it made me feel good. It made me feel right. So it wasn't just one thing I was escaping, Tim. I was escaping life. I was escaping having to be me, good and bad. And that's what, unfortunately, blackjack provided for me. And while it was only about a 2-year period when I did it, the level I did it, it robbed me of everything.
There was a moment on the ski lift where the world almost lost you. What pulled you back from that edge?
His name is Sherrod Williams. And Sherrod was my producer and dear friend when I was on the radio in New Jersey. So the story that Tim's referencing is my wife and I like to go to British Columbia. We'd go to Whistler. She loves to hike. I don't love it as much, but it was her happy place. And we took the kids there once and just fell in love with it. It's a gorgeous, gorgeous place. And you know, my world hadn't spiraled out of control yet, but it was on the way, and she had no idea. And we planned a husband-wife little 3-day getaway. To British Columbia. Kids are with my in-laws, and it was a chance for us to kind of reset and reconnect. And she was going to go on a crazy, awesome hike day one, and I had no interest in it. So I told her I'd hike on day two, but the first hike she was going to be on her own with a guide. And when she did that, I ate an edible, got on a ski lift in Whistler. This is summertime though, so no snow. Went to the top of the mountain where there's a restaurant, even in the off season, and I had some drinks and started kind of letting all the things that were happening in my life, all the negative things, started kind of processing over and over in my brain to the point of really being out of control. And it was overwhelming because I never talked about it. I'd internalized all of it. And now here I am in one of the most beautiful places on earth. And I'm high and I'm drinking. My wife's doing her favorite thing. And all of a sudden, like a tidal wave, it all just hit me. And as it was hitting me, because I didn't know I was going to get arrested, but I knew that I was in trouble. I knew I was up to no good. I knew that things were happening that weren't great. And I remember going up the ski lift, and I noticed that there was a family of bears on the mountain. I just happened to notice it. So I go up the ski lift as I'm coming down, and I did not feel this way going up. I think the hour and a half by myself drinking and being high and just being alone with nature, it just hit me like a ton of bricks. On the way down, as you know, I then decide I'm going to jump off the lift. And the only way I can describe it is it felt like the ground was calling me. The ground was pulling me down. I can't tell you that I wanted to die. I didn't have a suicidal thought right before it, but I knew I had to jump. I had to go. And the only other time I've experienced that was walking across the Golden Gate Bridge. The January before that, when I was there for the Super Bowl, and I was walking again with my wife, and I felt the water pulling me in. And I went from the outside lane to the inside lane because I'd never felt anything like that before. But my body was going over the Golden Gate Bridge. And it was very, very tangible, emotional feeling that I didn't tell anybody about. And now here I am, let's say 6 months later or so, and it's the same feeling. And I'm being pulled off the chairlift down to the ground. And no joke, I raised the bar up and I'm kind of scooting my butt towards the edge of the seat. And I'm not an emotional guy, I wasn't. And I'm not a crier. And all of a sudden, waterworks coming down my face. And I start talking to myself out loud. You're better than this. This is not how you're going out. You're not going to jump. Don't do this. And I'm saying this out loud, tears everywhere. And as I'm saying it, I'm shimmying closer to the edge to, I guess, the point of no return. And again, God's grace. My phone is on me. I quickly unlock it. First name that appears is Sherrod Williams. And I hit the button. He answers the phone and he hears me distraught. What's up? And I said, I need you to talk to me. I just need you to talk to me for maybe 20 seconds. I'm going to hurt myself. And he tells me he loves me. You're not going to hurt yourself. What are you doing? Where are you? And I said, I can't talk right now. I just need you to talk to me. And I don't care what you say. I just need you to talk. I'm about 30 seconds away from safety. And he saved my life. He told me he loved me, talked me down to the first stop. And then, like a guy who now is like, I came to, he goes, what the heck is wrong? What's going on? And I basically said, fuck you. I'll call you back. And I apologize for cursing, but that's what I said. And I hung up on him. And he calls me right back, and I answer. I go, I'm okay, but I'm going to call you back. You have no idea what's happening. He goes, all right, I'm here for you. Call me back. So you can imagine his side, like, oh my God, what's happening? So now, and I'm so glad I'm alive to laugh about this. What I didn't realize was that I only got to the midway point of the mountain. I still got to get down to the base of the mountain, which means you have two choices. You can walk, a lot of people do, but I remember I saw the bears on the way up and I got nobody to walk with. So I don't want to do that. it dawns on me the only other way down is to ask one of the kids operating the lift if they've got like a Jeep or a truck or an ATV and hitch a ride, or I got to get back on the lift, which I just try to jump off of. So I go to one of the kids, the guys, and I go, my man, I'm having a problem. Do you have a way down the mountain? He goes, yeah, you could walk or take the lift. We're not giving you transportation. Like, F off. I'm like, all right, great. So I'm like, I have to suck it up. I'm going to go back on another lift knowing that I might jump off of it. All right. So there's a small, like maybe 6 people in line to get on the lift. And there's a couple, they're in their 70s, enjoying their, I think it was their 50th wedding anniversary. And they're right in front of me. And I tapped them on the shoulder and I said, excuse me, I apologize for interrupting your day. I don't mean to do that. I'm having a tough time. I can't go down the lift by myself. Would you allow me to ride with you? Now they're on a romantic, this is their thing. And they look at each other like, what kind of lunatic is this? But they saw it in my eyes. I was in trouble. So they said, yeah, of course you can ride the lift with us. So they go to get on the lift. And I said to them, I don't want to be forward, but I got to sit in between you. I need one of you on one side and one of you on the other side. And they were a great family, great couple. Turns out their son was the second leading scorer in like BYU history behind Jimmer Fredette, right? And they talked me down and didn't know it, but played a role in me being alive today. But I didn't see it coming. It was crazy, that level of emotion that overtook me when I, as Tim said, almost took myself off this planet. Yeah, I'm so glad I didn't.
Did your wife find out? Did he leave her a voicemail? Did she find out, or were you able to keep it?
No, she didn't know for years. I didn't share that story with her for a long time. I became estranged from Sherrod as well, self-inflicted. And then when he and I kind of reconnected, and I thanked him for saving my life, which, as you can imagine, was an emotional moment. I shared the story, and I shared it, for the documentary, which I filmed a bunch of it before I went away, and then we filmed the rest when I got out. And that's when she learned about the story.
I didn't realize the timing of that. Wow. Hey, what did prison strip away, and what did it give you that success never could?
Prison stripped away my ego right quick. Within 5 minutes of walking into the federal prison I went into, kind of like you see in the movies, you're butt naked, bent over, and they're checking your rear end for contraband or things like that. So within the first 5 minutes, you're not in Oz anymore. That's for sure. Although that's probably a bad reference since the HBO show was called Oz. So you have a choice as a white collar criminal when you go to prison. Are you going to be humbled and accept the lesson you need to learn? Or do you still think, your shit doesn't stink and you're better than the people you're with? You're not. And for me, it wasn't hard to be humbled. I grew up in a humble family. I knew my poop stunk for sure. But what it gave me is immeasurable, because it gave me, I was away for a year and a week. So 53 weeks I was incarcerated. Then I did a year in a halfway house and a house arrest, but I was in a facility for 53 weeks. And what it gave me was an opportunity to reset my life, to figure out my priorities in life and be true to those priorities. And I think maybe, well, that's a big thing. More than about anything else, it taught me a great lesson of not just humility, but empathy for other people. Because the men that I was away with, if I presented them to you on a piece of paper based on what their crimes were, we would all agree I wouldn't go within a city mile of them. I would let my children within 10 city miles of them physically, based on, again, what they were accused of and what they were convicted of. And those same men that you'd be afraid of on a piece of paper, not all of them, obviously, because I was away with bad people, really bad people, but a decent enough percentage of them I found out to be the most loyal, caring, giving, smart human beings I've ever met in my life. And I never would have thought that. You know, I was the minority in prison as a white male, and a white collar criminal. The far majority of people I was with were African American or Hispanic. The far majority of them were in for drug related or gang related activities. And yet there are people that I will have in my life for the rest of my life who I met in prison. And I learned a great amount of empathy for them. And the old lesson we learned in kindergarten, you're not to judge a book by its cover. You know, I thought I was the greatest card player, right, in the world. I said that. There's three guys I could never beat. I'm really good at playing chess. There's a guy that ran 2 city blocks in Cincinnati, Ohio, was the most powerful drug dealer on that part of Cincinnati, Ohio. I couldn't beat him at chess. And I tried every day. And it's silly little things like that that I remember that I take with me to always give people I meet the benefit of the doubt. Now, you'll get burned sometimes as well. It's part of it. I get it. But that's one of the most valuable lessons I learned. Empathy for others, and then the ability to refine myself. Your biggest enemy in prison, and I can't speak to being in a max prison or a place where daily violence is really a risk. Where I was, if you wanted violence, you could get it. If you wanted a problem, it was there for you every day. But if you wanted to be left alone and do your time, you could do that in peace also. And that's obviously the direction and the path I chose. But it allowed me to rediscover myself. And not everybody gets that opportunity. And I do think in rediscovering myself, it allowed me to live my life with a much greater purpose. And that's what I try to do. And I learned that lesson. It's a lesson we should have learned, and we all learn at a much younger age. I learned it when I was 50.
You mentioned there were a couple moments that had to be like divine intervention. You don't have to go into all of them, but is there one that particularly sticks out when your time in jail?
So when I was in prison, I was entered into a program called RDAP, which is a residential drug program. They don't specify gambling as a part of it, but because I would drink a lot or do edibles a lot while I was gambling, I became eligible for this program. And it's available for every federal inmate, nothing special about me. When you go in and they read your entire story and report, the psychiatrist in charge of the program at the prison determines if you're eligible for the RDAP program. What RDAP does for every federal prisoner in this country, it's a 500-hour therapy program. If you graduate it, and less than half the people that take it graduate it, but if you graduate it, it takes a full year off your sentence. All right. So for me, a guy that had a 42-month sentence, if I graduate the RDAP program, I get a year off that sentence, which means the day I graduate the program, I now have less than a year to go on my sentence. And once you get under a year to go, you become eligible for halfway house or house release, and you're out of prison, right? So
I have to do it.
you have to do it, right?
Yep.
And it was one of those things where I went in and you have to apply for it. You meet the psychiatrist who runs the program. You tell them your story. They've already read, they know everything about you anyway, but they want to meet you and make sure you're not full of shit and a BS artist. And then when you get there, there are 4 counselors there. 3 of the counselors were just corrections officers who took a 2-week class, passed the test, and they became counselors. They don't know the first thing about therapy, but you can make more money as a counselor than you can as a guard. All right. If you get one of those 3 guys, you're not going to learn a damn thing. You're not going to get any better. You're going to basically fake your way through it the best you can, hope to graduate, and get that year off your sentence. Divine intervention. The psychiatrist approves me, even though it's not a gambling program. All right. Number 2, of the 4 counselors that you could have gotten, I happened to get the one guy that was a therapist. And he wasn't your typical, corrections officer who looks down upon you because, you live this gilded life and you've effed it up and shame on you and There's guys like that. They get mad at white collar criminals because you had your chance and you blew it, right? This guy truly wanted to help people. And again, I say it's the grace of God. You say what you want. I got to point it to him. And then he made sure I had the right person or case worker working on my case so that the day I became eligible to go home, they processed my paperwork. Things like that. I was in prison when COVID hit. We're on immediate lockdown, can't move. And the program, the RDAP program, was put on hiatus, meaning more time you got to wait. You can't graduate the program when you were supposed to, meaning you're not going home when you were supposed to. And I'll never forget this. They gave every one of us in the program the opportunity, if we'd been approved to go home, to leave the program, go back to what amounts to Gen Pop, a different unit. And then because of COVID, they were going to send a bunch of us home. All right. So I had to make a choice: stay in prison, not knowing when the RDAP program was going to continue, and you'll kind of gamble, roll the dice that it would continue fast enough where I get out when I was hoping to get out, right? Or go to this other unit, lose the RDAP time, but go home earlier. And they promised us we were going home in a week. So how do you say no to going home? So I opted out of RDAP like a lot of guys did, and I decided I'm going home. About 4 days into that, they rescinded the offer. When they rescinded the offer to go home, the psychiatrist that ran the RDAP program said, "We're not taking any of you back. You have to start the program new." Meaning I wasn't going to get the year off. I was going to be in prison for another year to year and a half because of the decision I made to opt out, because they promised us we were going home. And again, divine intervention. I have somebody in my life that was able to pick up the phone and inquire about the RDAP program, having to restart it when it was the prison that told us we were going home. And because of that, the prison then recanted on their decision to screw all of us and let all of us go back to the RDAP program and finish out the program we had already started. And if I don't have the ability to make that call, or someone doesn't make that call, if the psychiatrist doesn't change your mind, if the prison's not willing to consider what was taking place, I would have been in prison for another year and a half.
Wow.
So all those things lined up for me and for many other people who also got out when I got out, and it let me go home.
What surprised you most about Grace? Both the people who offered it and the places it showed up.
Well, you learn a valuable lesson when you get in trouble. You learn literally overnight who your real friends are. And I kind of put people into three categories in that regard. There's the people that you think have your back and are loyal friends, or even family members. And they're with you. They never waver on their support for you. And that's awesome. Then there's the people that you think that are, and as soon as the poop hits the fan, they're the first ones off the boat. And sadly, I experienced a lot of that. People I thought were dear friends of mine, loyal friends of mine, lifelong friends of mine, and even some family members who turned their back on me. And that's a very tough pill to swallow because you really don't see it coming. And it's one of the hardest parts of my whole story are the friendships I've lost, the family members and relationships I've lost, my fault, but the people I thought would never waver in their support of me, who did. And then you have this third kind of bucket of people, which is a very positive bucket. And it's the people you never even thought of in your life that would have your back and be there for you, who show up. And I've been blessed to have those people as well. So while I've lost people, and there's some people I know, sadly, I'll never get back, I also gained people in my life that were there for me, for my wife, for my kids, for my family. And, I consider myself extraordinarily fortunate to have those people in my life. As much as the people that I knew would be there are there, the people you never think of that show up for you, that call your wife once a week, every week for over a year, just to check in with her to make sure she's okay. The people that you don't even know they do it, who put money in your prison account so you can buy stuff that you need to get through the process of living in prison. And I've been blessed. I've been blessed to have the good, and I've suffered through the bad in that as well. But I don't hold any animosity towards the people that turn their back on me. I made it easy to do that. And I instead choose to focus on the people that love me and care about me. And I, try to pay that loyalty back every day.
Did that happen right away, or did you not know about it till you got out?
As far as just the general who's with you, who's without,
Yeah, because I feel like people could have the excuse of like, well, you've been gone, so I didn't, you know what I mean?
most of it you learn right away because there's so much time between when you get arrested and when you ultimately go away. So I was arrested. Um, I was arrested September 6th, 2017, but I didn't go away till 19. So that's a lot of time
Yeah.
with not a lot of stuff to do to figure out who's still there and has your back. And by the way, when I say that, I don't mean materialistically, financially, any of that. I mean
Yeah.
emotionally. Who's there for you? Who checks in on you? Who makes sure you didn't jump off, that chairlift? That type of stuff. Who cares about, your children? I had people in my life that I won't name who had a great relationship with my kids. All right. And bought them, Christmas gifts, birthday gifts. You love them, uncle this, uncle that, right? And one of the hardest things for me to drop and get over, and truthfully told, I'm not 100% over it. I never will be. Like, my kids did nothing wrong. My kids and my wife were the 5 biggest victims of the bad decisions I made. They come first. I hurt them more than I hurt anybody else. And there were people in my life that had a great relationship with my wife and my 4 children who, the day I got arrested, turned their backs on them. And I have found it hard to forgive them for that.
Yeah. Rightfully so.
So I keep it to myself and I just process it and put it away.
In launching Hello, My Name is Craig, you gave your addiction a name, a voice, and a place to help others. When did you realize your pain had purpose?
I realized it when I was in rehab. My last night in rehab, I asked the rehab director if at my cost we could have a quote unquote family dinner. I'm a big food guy, grew up family and food, that kind of thing. Always wanted to be the house where everybody came to on Sundays, for a big Italian feast and all that jazz. And we always did that. And I realized that my story could help other people and I could help other people that night. It was the last night in rehab. And the director of the facility allowed me to, use my credit card to go to the supermarket, and I bought everything for the house. So you're talking, it was about a dozen people in rehab with me, and there was a local GA that we all went to at a local veterans hospital. So there was about another 20 people. We came in for a big Italian feast. And I just want to thank all of them for their support and helping me through the early stages of my recovery. And they kind of got together and elected one person spokesman for the group. And they, at the end of the dinner, they asked me if I would do them a favor. And I said, sure, anything. What's the favor? And collectively, what they said to me was, if you ever get back on the radio or on TV or have the platform you once had, will you always tell your story? Will you let people know that there's people like us that exist and we're not bad people? We have a problem. We're trying to get help for that problem, but not to look at us in the manner you look at us. And it was the first time that I came to terms with the reality that is one of my focuses now. And that is, when it comes to addiction, alcoholics are alcoholics, period, stop. Drug addicts are called drug addicts, period, stop. But for compulsive gamblers or gambling addicts, we're the only addicts known to man that lives with the reality that when you refer to us as a community, or me or you or him or her individually, you refer to me as a degenerate. And it's a tough word for a lot of us to live through. It's a shame involved with that. So at this family dinner, the group said to me, will you make us a pledge that you would use your position on the radio or TV to tell your story, to let people like us tell our stories and make sure that people start learning about what we go through and who we are. And when they asked me to do that, I flippantly said yes, not giving it a lot of thought, but they meant the world to me. And I wasn't going to say no no matter what they asked me for. And then when I came back, the guy who's been my patron saint professionally and personally, Chris Olivero, who runs the radio company for what was Odyssey and now is, I guess it's still Odyssey, in New York and globally. He came to me and said, I have an idea. If we put you back on the radio, this is back in 2020, I think you should do a public service show about gambling addiction. And I said, you got to be kidding me. I just made a pledge like 3 months ago to the people I was in rehab with that I would do exactly that. And I said, I don't trust myself 100% just yet. Would you put it in my contract? Now, I don't get paid for it. I want to be clear about that. I've never made a nickel off of hello, my name is Craig, or doing that, talking to people. I do it because it's the right thing to do. And I said, I want you to put it in my contract that if I failed to do it, you can fire me for cause. And he did. And it's really because of him and his foresight into thinking about it, not even knowing, and those men and women that I met in rehab in Prescott, Arizona. Without them, I'd like to think I still would have done it, but I don't know for a fact that I would have. So, hello, my name is Craig is the single most important content I've ever done. It's like therapy for me to do it. It brings me back to a good baseline of who I am and what I did that got me in trouble. And it's also, I think, a really important show to do because we're trying to humanize the addict. We want people to recognize that whatever you might think about me, I can take the slings and arrows. It's all good. I have thick skin. I'm a big boy. But this is your school teacher, your firefighter, your librarian, your deli worker, your bus driver. This is now invading all aspects of life. And the fact that I now give a platform for other addicts to share their story, I think it helps humanize addiction, helps humanize the addict. And one day, maybe I'll live to see it. We can take that word degenerate away from the addiction, which is very serious. And I really have to say I enjoy doing it.
So when you got out of, well, I guess when you started doing it, you got out of your last stint of rehab. There was it work? And you said you're only unemployed for 3 months. Did people, were they lined up saying, "Hey, come right back here," or was it more challenging than that?
So I had two offers. So I got out in June of 2020. When I got out of prison, I was living in a halfway house in Brooklyn, and then they moved me to a halfway house in Newark, New Jersey. Worse than prison. They treat you literally like you're an animal. You live in cages. It's a disgusting, disgusting, inhumane place. Both of them, both Brooklyn and in Newark, New Jersey, and need a major overhaul. Story for another day. So when I came out, I talked quite quickly with WFAN. No, nothing was promised. It was just let's have some talks. And story very few people know, a radio station in Philadelphia came to me with an aggressive offer for me to go back on radio immediately. I got out June 20th, I think it was, or June of 20. They were willing to put me on the air in July or August, like that quickly. All right. And they offered me, I won't say how much, an obscene amount of money to save the radio station and go and do morning drive in Philadelphia, where I had worked previously in the mid 90s, different radio station, but in the mid 90s. And I would have had to have moved, closer to Philly, which I wasn't prepared to do. Outside of that, the only other person that reached out to me was Fox. And the Fox comment was, I met with Fox Sports before I went away, a guy named Charlie Dixon. And Charlie said to me before I went away, if you ever get your life straight, I will hire you. I think you're the most talented guy in the world. Love to work with you. I never thought anything of it. I got out. He didn't have my email, didn't have my phone number because I didn't have one, but he had my LinkedIn account, which I never used. And apparently for a month, he emailed me or LinkedIn me, whatever you call it, like twice a week for a month. And I never responded because I had no idea. And the last message I got from him was, if you're not interested, no problem. Just let me know. And I had no idea he was reaching out to me. They then waited for a radio to hire me back, let someone else kind of tip their toe in the water, make sure it's okay to be employed or, be in business with me. And then FAN made me an offer to return in November. So July, August, September. So 4 months after getting out of prison, I was gainfully employed. And the reason I said yes to the Fan, which, by the way, offered me a third of what I got offered in Philly. It was not about the money. Even though I was bankrupt and needed money, it was, I had to get back to New York. I had to get back to the radio station that made me a star. I owed it to them. I owed it to the audience that was very good to me and loyal to me. And as much as the other offer was a better financial offer, I couldn't see myself coming back to radio and not returning to where I had my most success. And that's why I said no to Philly and quickly said yes to New York.
I'm kind of surprised you didn't go right back with Boomer and kind of resume where things were.
Yeah, well, makes two of us. That's another story for another day. But obviously, it was talked about. It was discussed. It's obviously back then where I wanted to go because we had created something, even in my 34 years and the success I've been blessed to have, nothing comes close to that success. We had something very unique, very special that the radio station hasn't had since. I haven't had since. He hasn't had since. So the idea of get the band back together and give
Yeah.
New Yorkers what we know they want certainly was on my mind. Just the timing wasn't right, and it just didn't work out.
Craig, you've said there's an inevitable tsunami coming with legalized sports betting. What do you think we're still not ready to face?
We're not ready to face the apples of our eyes, our children having a problem, and it's happening in record numbers. And while I supported legalized wagering, and I'll tell you why in a second, the reality is that they're starting so much younger, and it's a problem that no one knows how to handle. Right now, today, as we sit here, there are only 4 gambling rehab centers in the country. 4 in the entire country. Now, other places that do drugs and alcohol are starting to try to add therapists, but even the education for the therapist is way behind. And it's starting with high school kids. Like I go into high schools every week now, talking to high school juniors and seniors about gambling. And the promise and the deal I make with the schools is I need the kids to be honest with me. So we have to have an agreement. What you see and hear from the kids in this auditorium cannot be used against them. And they all agree to it. I make them sign that. And when I say, I was at an academy, private school academy in New Jersey a couple of weeks ago. So 470 high school kids, 9 through 12. And I said, I tell all the kids, no matter what happens in here, it's like it didn't happen. You have my word on that. We have an agreement with the school. Show of hands. How many of you have gambled or know somebody in this room that is currently gambling? 470 hands go right high in the air. And the epidemic people aren't ready for is their innocent, law-abiding children who are doing something that's getting out of control because parents are really busy right now. And for a lot of these kids, the younger kids, the way it starts is, it's out. When you and I grew up, our parents threw us out of the house at 6 or 7 o'clock in the morning and said, don't be late for dinner. And that's how we lived. I assume you were the same. You had a bicycle, you had your group of neighborhood friends, and whatever trouble you got into was innocent trouble. And life was very easy back then. They only told you, look out for the unmarked van hanging out near school. That was the only thing we were ever afraid of. Chester, the molester, in the unmarked van. That was the biggest worry as a kid growing up in the 70s and early 80s, right? But the problem now is because parents are so busy or want to be so busy, they're not in tune with what their kids are doing. And I know I'm kind of soapboxing this here, but I see it every day. And dad's a sports fan, son's a sports fan. What's a great way for father and son to bond on Sunday? I know what we'll do. I'm going to open up an account and we're going to gamble together. And it's going to be nominal amounts of money, but father and son have 25 bucks on the Giants game this afternoon. And they win. Ah, that's great. And they lose. Oh, the Giants stink. The kid never thinks twice about it. The dad pays the credit card bill. Not a big deal. Okay, great. It starts innocently, right? Bonding, fun, sports, action, all that stuff. What the father then doesn't realize is that when he goes to work on Monday, the kid has access to the gambling account. And the kid now has the bug because maybe they won 25 bucks or 100 bucks or he got that new Xbox because they won money gambling. So the kid's like, well, dad's not going to mind. We did it together. And the kid now starts accessing the account and the dad's got no idea. And the mom's got no idea. They're busy anyway. And then one day you wake up, why do I have $1,000 credit card bill? Oh, dad, I didn't tell you. I bet on the Knicks and I bet on the Yankees and I'm betting. Well, I can afford the $1,000. Stop doing it, son. But they don't turn the account off. So now you have developed a situation where when the kid wins, he benefits from the win. But the kid never experiences losing. The money never comes out of the kid's account. He's never grounded. He's never punished. You don't break open his piggy bank and take his allowance. So all the kid knows is when I gamble, I win. And that creates a problem. And every high school I go into, that story I just told you is playing out right now in every high school in America. Everyone.
We're smirking. I don't want to make light of the situation, but my younger brother is doing exactly what you just described, except instead of the Giants games, it's the Falcons games.
Right.
Is happening in real time. But I don't want to make light. My brother, at least so far, isn't an addict, so I don't want to make light of it. But it's not. You're not saying everyone who does it's an addict. You're just saying it opens the door.
And I want to be clear. So the latest stats that have come in, it's higher number. The less mature you are, the higher likelihood you may have a problem. Your brain's not fully developed yet. You have no financial responsibility yet. Very few of these kids actually have jobs, right? All that type of stuff. So for most Americans, let's say 3% of everyone that gambles is ever going to become a compulsive gambler. So it doesn't sound like a lot, but Missouri just came online. So they're the 39th state, I think it is, to legalize gambling. So if you now have 100 million extra people gambling, that's 3 million people in this country with a gambling problem. When you go to the high school kids, that number's closer to 6 or 7%. So you're talking about in your one small community, it might be a kid, it might be 2 or 3 kids, 8 kids. But now you take that problem coast to coast, now you're talking about millions of high school kids with a gambling disorder, a gambling problem. And the thing that scares people like me, based somewhat on experience and somewhat anecdotally, is gambling addicts have the highest rate of suicide of any addictive personality or behavior that exists. So now you have an immature 17-year-old, the walls are caving in, doesn't want to tell his dad, hey, I'm down 5,000 bucks. You'll make up a number, an arbitrary number that means something to the family. His friends can't support him. And now that kid is isolated from his family, isolated from his friends, and is on his own, and he's not emotionally mature enough or equipped to handle that. And that to me is my biggest fear, that you're going to see high school kids doing something that's irreversible.
It's not the exact same as gambling, but there was a kid who was day trading I read about.
Same thing.
And the account, yeah, and the account, it was a glitch in the system. The account showed like negative $60,000, and the kid, it wasn't right. He was not negative 60. It was an error on the account, and the kid committed suicide because he thought he didn't know what to do about that issue. I think exactly what you're saying, right? But the number, because to an adult, even if you don't have a lot of money, your life is worth more. You can overcome $1,000 debt. Not that you want to, But to a 17-year-old, 16-year-old, 18-year-old, 19-year-old that doesn't want to tell their parents, it could seem like the world.
And it is, and look, you hide things anyway as a teenager, right? Whether you're dating or, your buddy might be smoking weed for the first time or whatever. It's just, that's growing up. We've all done that. That's not unique to me, to you, to any other, or even generationally. But when all of a sudden you have this amount, like, I'll give you a quick example, the financial pressure. So I'm counseling a kid, nice boy, great family, the whole bit. He gets involved too deep, can't get out of it. There's enough kids, private school kids. So there's kids in the school with, obscene wealth. One kid acts as his bookie, another kid acts as a loan shark. And now the kid owes his friends, quote unquote, 20, 30,000 bucks. Doesn't know what to do. Kid's in trouble. Parents call me. I talk to the kid. Thank God this one particular kid has figured his stuff out. And I ask him for a list of everybody he owes money to. Normally that takes a while for someone to actually give you the list or people's names because they don't want to be a rat or a snitch. So I'll never forget the first kid that he turns me on to who's acting as a loan shark. Okay. The kid borrowed $2,000 and now this 18-year-old boy tells him he owes him 10. All right. So I call the kid up. The kid's an idiot. He answers the phone, takes my call, and the kid's cocky. He's arrogant. This kid at the time was a freshman and a division division 1 or 2 athlete. Okay. And I go, look, so-and-so owes you X amount of bucks. I want to make sure I got the numbers right. I go, I'm just calling you on his behalf. And I'm going to let you know he's going to pay you back every nickel. He's not getting out of the debt. He borrowed money from you. He has to pay it back. But you need to hear from me, an adult, you're not getting that money tomorrow. And he's going to pay you back. We acknowledge he has debt. And it's going to take him the better part of this year to pay you back. And he's going to pay you back every penny of the $2,000 he owes you. And the kid goes, it ain't $2,000 anymore. He owes me 10 now. Interest. And I go, my man, we're not charging him interest. It's not even on the table. And he goes, my dad knows what I'm doing. He's proud of me and supports me in this. I go, I never said I was going to call your dad. I go, I have no interest in talking to your dad about it. He goes, well, then who are you going to call? I go, well, I'm calling you to make sure you're going to do the right thing. But now that you've expressed to me that you're not, I have 2 phone calls to make. And the kid's really cocky. And he goes, well, who are you going to call? I go, the first person I'm going to call is the Attorney General, who I know personally. And I said, because that type of interest is illegal. I go, and that's a class 2 felony. We'll start with that. I go, but if I don't call him, I go, I know your coach and I know your athletic director. And I will call them. Well, why would you call them? Well, because they need to know that one of their scholarship athletes is a loan shark and is committing a felony on campus. Would your dad be proud of that? He only owes me $2,000. I don't need to take any interest. Please don't make that phone call. And would you kindly lose my number? But that's what's happening, and this kid was through it and went through it. And the walls were caving in. His parents couldn't help him. And then he's at odds with his mom and dad because they're on his ass all the time. And the reality is that if someone like me is not available to that family, God knows what would happen with that kid. And that's real life. That's what's happening right now. And that's when you asked him about, the tsunami that's coming, I promise you it's coming. And just to finish the initial thought, the reason I was in favor of legalized gambling is because we're going to get to a place in this generation where gambling talk becomes dinner table conversation. And ultimately that is a good thing because you want gambling conversation to be more mainstreamed because it makes it easier for someone to raise their hand and say, I need help. I got a problem. If gambling is still a seedy, back alley thing that you're ashamed of or embarrassed about doing, and not everyone does it, then it's much harder to ask a younger person to come forward and ask for help and say they have a problem.
What constitutes a problem?
What constitutes a problem is when you're wagering beyond your means, when wagering becomes the most important thing in your life, when you're choosing to focus on wagering instead of all the other things you enjoy doing in life, when you withdraw from your social friend group, when you withdraw from activities and hobbies and activities that you like to do, and when gambling becomes too present in your life. And all those things are signs. There's no reason for me to be in the bathroom 7 times in one night at a house party. There's no reason for me to suddenly be really upset that, I don't know, San Diego State's volleyball team lost the match. Like, there are signs. We got to be willing to look at those signs, but those signs exist. Like I tell the story all the time. I once wagered on a Tijuana dog race, and I'm not even sure if the dogs existed. But if you had been in my life, you would have said to me, Craig, why are you so upset that the dog lost the race in Tijuana? I don't know the dog. That would be a sign that maybe I'm gambling on something I shouldn't be gambling on. And all those things are signs.
Is there a almost like a frequency thing? Like if I was gambling, like not in the same world, but I was gambling more than I should have been. Not money, not dollars, but frequency. I was gambling. I was like the football game, then there's the UFC fight, then there's a college game, and I said to myself, like, I might have a problem. And I'm like, you know what? I'm just gonna cold turkey stop for a few weeks, and if I can do that, then I'm probably okay. And then I did actually.
It is the time issue is as big as the money part. It's like I always say to people, look, I can't tell you to stop not to gamble. You may never have a problem. So if you decide you handicap, Sunday 1:00, and you feel strongly that whatever is going to happen, and you put 50, whatever amount of money, it's irrelevant. It's all relative to what you have. You put $50 on a bet, great, no problem at all. The problem then becomes you lose the bet and you're pissed, and you're like, well, there's 4:00 games and you lose that one.
Yeah.
Well, why do you think there's Sunday night football? For more gambling. And then Monday night football, now Thursday football. It's to satisfy us gamblers. So yeah, the time part of it's a key part of it. You can only wager what you have access to. But that doesn't mean you don't spend all day thinking about it and processing it. One of the biggest things for gamblers in recovery is what do you do with all the available brain space you now have that you used to use on gambling? And when I say on gambling, it's what I was just referencing. Where am I getting money from? Who do I owe money to? Who owes me money? Where am I going to gamble? How am I going to gamble? How am I going to, and all that stuff, that takes up so much brain matter that when you stop gambling, I encourage everyone I counsel, you better find a hobby. Because if you don't, you're going to go back and gamble. You need something else to do.
Yeah.
So for guys like us, maybe it's, playing ball or playing golf or, going for a long walk or hitting the weights or something athletic, something physical. So like I go on 6-mile walks every day. I'm blessed that I'm able to do that. I'm outside with my dog. One of my 4 sons, very similar to me, personality wise, we, no joke, go outside and we chop wood almost every day. We chainsaw tree. I like being outside. I have one son of my 4 kids, thank God, who likes getting dirty with me. And for him, that's like a respite for him and therapeutic for him. It's great father-son bonding, and we're manly and we're dirty and we're chainsawing wood and we're chopping wood and my pile's bigger than your pile. And, but if I didn't have, and it seems silly, if I didn't have that, I don't know if I'd be in recovery. You need something. You need an outlet. You need it, and a healthy one.
Yeah, things like reading, working out, or other healthy hobbies can still get you that dopamine. Craig, another tough topic, but I want to make sure we hit on it. You hid your childhood abuse for decades. What did speaking that truth out loud teach you about healing?
That might be the toughest question you've asked today because I don't talk about it. So it's a strange thing because I never would have ever uttered a word about it publicly, ever. When I got arrested and I met with the FBI and then your U.S. Marshals and all that, and you go through the system, this is not unique to me. It's everyone's ever been arrested. You fill out they fill out for the court what's called a PSR. It's basically it's like a 5-hour interview about your life from birth to today. I mean, it's a very intrusive interview. And while your lawyer can be in the room, he can't say anything. And it's an officer of the court, essentially, a sheriff, a marshal, etc. And they interview you, and I'm not exaggerating, every minute detail that you can remember from birth to today. So it's for someone that doesn't like to talk about a lot of themselves or their history or childhood. For someone like me, that was a difficult interview, as you could imagine. But you're told from Jump Street, you have to be as honest as you've ever been about anything, because in telling your story, there might be something in your story that not as a mitigating factor for what you did, but could be a mitigating factor for your ultimate sentence. And that means all the good, all the bad. You know, you did a lot of charity work, included. You know, you're good. You know, you've worked in a soup kitchen, included. You know, you're a bad guy, you include everything, because they're going to find out everything anyway. It's kind of like the premise of all this. So I had spent my entire life acknowledging what happened to me at a summer camp when I was a kid, a single time in my entire life. I told my wife before we got married, I'm now married 26 years, because I just wanted her to know who she was marrying. And I thought if I was ever going to share this story that I'd never shared before with any human being on the planet, she deserved to be the person I shared it with. So she knew the story. She did not know the graphic detail of what happened to me. So the first time I ever had to do that was for this PSR. The first time I ever did it for myself, I wrote a book. The book was called Loudmouth, and Simon & Schuster were the publishers of this book. And I wrote a chapter. I don't know why I wrote it. I guess it was cathartic for me after hiding it and, you know, kind of pushing it down for my entire life. And I can get into this more with you in depth if you want. For some reason, writing this book about my life, I thought it'd be interesting if I put on paper an experience I had only internalized since it happened and never shared with anybody. And I did. And I used to email Simon & Schuster every chapter as I wrote the book. And this one chapter, I said to the publisher, the head guy, I said, I wrote something, I'm uncomfortable about it, but I can't email it to you because I was afraid that people would read it. I said, so I'm going to bring it into your office on a piece of paper. I'm going to let you read it, and then I'm going to watch you light it on fire. And that's what I did. And as I'm sitting in this office with a grown man who I'd only met once or twice, didn't know him, and there's tears rolling down his face as he's reading this chapter I wrote about being molested as a kid at a summer camp. And he said, it's 25 years of doing this business. It's the most powerful, honest, real thing maybe I've ever read. He goes, the only issue with putting it in the book is if you put it in the book, that's the only thing people are going to talk about. And that becomes the focal point of the book. And every other chapter is hijinks and fun and, you know, laughs. He goes, so if you want to put it in the book, I'm telling you, it's the most powerful thing I've ever read, but it changes the book. And you need to think long and hard about if you want to do that. And the reason he said that to me was, and I apologize for rambling here, was
No, don't apologize.
He said, if it's in the book, you know, Tim, you've written books, right? In the contract, you have to do a certain number of appearances on talk shows and bookstores, and whatever's in the book is now fodder to be interviewed about. He said, when you go on Fox News for the interview, they're going to ask you about that event. When you go on whatever, that's the story. So if you don't want people to really know about it or talk about it, or have to answer questions about it, you can't put it in the book, because now you're going to be forced to deal with it publicly. And it was great advice, and he lit it on fire, and that was it. And I obviously I have a copy of it on my computer, but I never shared it with anyone. So now fast forward all those years later, I get arrested. I'm in this interview about my life, and I tell the marshal about what happened to me as a kid. And unbeknownst to me, that becomes public record. So now it becomes Craig Carton is using an invented event when he was a child to explain his criminal ways. And I never did that. I never once said I made the dumb decisions I made as a 50-year-old because something bad happened to me when I was 9. I never did that. I correlated the safe space you've asked me about in gambling, and you asked him, what was I escaping? For sure, that's part of it. The demon of being molested as a kid. But I never used it as an excuse or wanted to use it as an excuse for what I did as a 50-year-old grown man. But the way the story got told is I'm inventing or coming up with childhood abuse to try to lessen my sentence. No, I told the story to the marshal because I had to. I was ordered to, or else I never would have. And I was not using it as an excuse. And then it comes out, and I guess fortunately for me, people haven't latched onto it. It's about the gambling, which is, really the front and center story that got me involved with bad people to do bad things. And very few people, almost no one until today, has really brought that event in my life up. But it's a life-changing event. As negative as it was for me, the experience that I went through, it also gave me the ability to get through something like this, right? And being in prison and all the things that have come with it, because I survived childhood trauma on my own. I didn't have a parent to go to that I felt comfortable enough to open up to and be honest with. I didn't have a sibling I could do that with. Now, they may have been great. I just didn't trust them and didn't feel comfortable sharing that story. My wife's amazing and has always said, I want you to tell me the whole story because you need to get it out of your system. And I think she's probably right. But I sucked it up. I internalized it. I kept it to myself. And I think doing that in a very strange way has afforded me a certain life skill that allows me to get through this and has allowed me to get through it. Because if you can overcome that as like, I was a kid, I was an innocent kid who had his world wrecked at the hands of a grown man for no reason. And I had to figure out a way to survive that, to deal with that, to emotionally process that. And I'll be the first to tell you that I suck at sharing emotions because of it. I'm not an open book in my private life. I'm very quiet. I don't share feelings, emotions. I don't cry. I've got a ridiculous level of pain tolerance, both physical and emotional. And as much as I know there's people that care about me and love me and support me, sadly, I can only trust myself to get through, tough emotional moments. And that's because of what happened to me when I was 9 years old.
Thank you for sharing that. I know
Yeah.
you didn't have to, you don't like talking about it. I could have told you that maybe emotionally there was something off when you were thinking about suicide. You said to the guy, "Fuck you, I'll call you back."
Yeah.
But seriously,
Yeah.
all
I'm
jokes
that guy.
aside, that's a big moment in your life and very deep, and obviously you don't like talking about it. So
Yeah. And
thank
it's
you for
weird because
sharing it.
and seeing the benefit of talking about my gambling addiction, how it helps so many people. One of my internal battles, to go back to a question from an hour ago, that you had, Tim, about, the quiet time. There's not a day that goes by, not a day, where, and it might be fleeting, it might be quick, sometimes it's longer, where I'm not brought back, to that summer and what happened to me. It's in my brain, in my head, every single day, and has been since the day it happened. And while I have great days, obviously, and days that are joyful and full of accomplishment and great things, there's a little moment every day, um, yeah, that I have to deal with it and remember it. And I'm sure that's the same for all survivors.
Do you think, to your wife's point, it would help? Like, it sounds like your gambling addiction, like you're on now that you're kind of on the other side of it. You said, like, one of the first, like when we first started talking, you said it's so easy to talk about now because you're kind of through it. It almost sounds like, to your wife's point, it's like, would it help you get through that, or is that maybe it's a different experience?
Well, I think she's probably right, you know. I think, psychiatrists, psychologists, therapists have jobs for a reason. There's got to be some type of data that proves that, if you open up to them, they can help you. Um, I've just always shied away from it, you know.
Yeah.
And look, I had when I got in trouble, one of the things the court ordered was therapy, and I had this great guy, he's since retired. The only of all the different therapists I've talked to throughout this whole procedure, it's the only guy I respected, the only guy I liked. I always thought I was smarter than the therapist and could get over on them, and I wasn't going to share anything. But this guy was special, and he got me to open up about everything other than that. And it was like a battle we had. And he was like, "I can't retire until you talk to me about it." And I said, "Then you're never going to retire." And then I had a great rapport with him. He's a good man, and I'll never forget that I went into his office one day. And he goes, "Look, today's gonna be a tough day for you. I'm gonna make you talk about it. And I just want to be open. I'm not gonna play games with you and try to trick you into it. Tell me what happened. Walk me through it." And I said, "Have you ever seen the movie Good Will Hunting? One of my favorite movies." He goes, "Of course I've seen it." And I said, I go, "If you had to guess my favorite scene in the movie, could you guess it?" And he guessed a couple different scenes and he didn't get it right. And he goes, "What's your favorite scene in the movie?" And it's only one. And my single favorite scene in Good Will Hunting is when Will Hunting is sitting with, Robin Williams in there, and he spends the entire session and doesn't say a word. Because it's impossible to do that. And I told him that's what I was going to do. And I did it. I did. I was so proud of myself, which is so stupid. I sat on this guy's couch for 50 minutes and I did not utter a single word. And then he realized to stop asking. And he did. He stopped asking. He tried to get into it in a cute way down the line, but he never directly ever asked me about it ever again.
How do you carry both the harm you caused and the help you're trying to offer people them now?
I keep them compartmentalized. I don't think I could help people for the next 25 years. I don't think it's ever going to make up for the hurt I caused in people. So I have to keep them separate. I've tried to make amends with the people I've hurt, directly, emotionally, financially, etc. And I've done a pretty good job of that. Not with everyone. Like I said, you're not going to get everyone back, unfortunately. But I don't use it. I'm not like banking credits to try to one day pay off, the harm I caused. I view them as independent assets and independent things. The harm I caused to people lives and has its own heartbeat over here. And I'm sensitive to it and cognitive of it. And I never say, "Hey guys, I hurt. Look at all the good I'm doing over here," because it doesn't change the fact that I hurt them. And it's funny because I remember in rehab saying at one point, like, there's not a line out the door of people that, I hurt, financially through all this, but you hurt one person, it's too many. I'm sensitive to that, and there are two individuals that I, hurt financially, and I'm making restitution payments to them. All the people over here that I've helped, that's just more, it's the right thing to do. So I do it. And I do get great satisfaction of helping them and having these people now in my life and, getting a happy, Merry Christmas card, Happy New Year, text or email, because I don't talk to all of them all the time. And there's a lot of them that have kind of graduated from the program and are doing great. And, maybe once a month I'll check in, just, "Hey, how's it going? How you been?" And they'll check in with me. So it's a great reminder that I'm doing really good things, but it doesn't take away from the stuff on the other side. Never will.
Your comeback wasn't guaranteed. Why do you think the audience welcomed you back?
The audience welcomed me back because they viewed me as one of them. They were included in the ride. And while I lied to a lot of people in my personal life around gambling, the only place in my life that I've never lied was on the air. So the relationship I had with the audience was true, was pure, and I talk the way people talk. There was no pretense to how I talked, language-wise, ideology, opinions. I basically, without knowing it, I gave a voice to the average New York guy, the blue collar guy, the white, didn't matter any of that. I said all the stuff that they were thinking and either couldn't say or wanted to say. And apparently no one else had really done that at that level prior to me at that particular radio station. You know, I drank with the people. I partied with the people. I went to games with the people. You know, I was available to the people. Um, and I think there was just an innate respect for that. I never acted like I was better than anyone, didn't talk like I was better than you. You know, I grew up on the same streets as you, have the same, friends in the same deli and all that stuff. You know, ate the same food. And I think that really came through. And I think if I had one superpower in radio, it's that I talk about things the way average people talk about things. And that's always resonated in all the different places I've been a broadcaster. That one thing has always resonated.
Were you worried about that style with cancel culture? It seems like it's kind of gone away, but it was on a rise there for a while. And it sounds like the average sounds like your style would have been a problem with that.
Well, so it's evolved. Like I've said this all the time. If you go back, let's say 20 years, and thank God you can't. If I played you the demo tape I used to get jobs, you wouldn't hire me today. So there's a line you cannot cross. That line has moved in the last quarter century for sure, right? I started my professional career in 1991 in Buffalo, like I said. In 1991, you could say a lot more things, caustic things, objectionable things, than you can say today. So as society has changed, as sensibility has changed, the line has changed. And if you choose not to pay attention to that line, you will be unemployed very quickly. So I've evolved as a broadcaster as society has evolved. So the line's just different.
You've had to reinvent not just your career, but your character. What's changed most in the way you see yourself?
Well, I think I'm good at what I do. I've got no ego. It's gone. It's gone. And I think that's a good thing. And again, I think you can believe in yourself and not be egotistical. So I believe I'm good at what I do. I think my career bears that out. But man, when when we first got to number one in New York City, me and Boomer on the fan, the show was called Boomer and Carton. It changed me. Even though I have the same insecurities and I prepare and all the stuff we talked about earlier, it being number one in New York City, comes with certain things you may not be prepared for, access to certain things and certain people. And there's no doubt about it, that was like a drug to me. And even though I returned to New York and I was number one in the afternoons, and I was proud of that, and I'd be happy to tell you that our show was number one, no ego. My ego drove me, and now it doesn't. So that's the best change for me.
Faith for many like me is forged in the fire. Did you find your faith tested in the darkness? And if so, what answered?
Yeah, listen, my faith has been tested a lot. My faith has been tested in my career when, I've been fired before, earlier in my career, and didn't think it was a deserved firing. I've had a lot of people tell me that I wasn't going to make it, so that sometimes makes you go home and question, am I in the right profession? Did I choose the right profession? Am I good enough to make it in a major market and be number one? And then ultimately, going to prison, I don't know how it doesn't test your faith. I don't know how I just don't know how you could possibly spend a lifetime as a law abiding citizen where prison was one of your most irrational fears in life. And I had that. And then go to prison and not have your faith tested. And for me, it's kind of like a roller coaster ride. Like my faith was tested, and yet surviving prison in the manner I did and getting through prison in the manner I did, coming out the other side and having career successes I've been blessed to have, I have a renewed sense of faith too, in myself, spiritually, in the people that have supported me. But man, it has been a roller coaster ride. And the roller coaster ride ain't fun all the time.
What's the hardest part of staying clean, not just from gambling, but from the lies you tell yourself?
The hardest part was giving up something that I enjoyed so much. Like I loved it. I loved playing cards. I used to, if you checked out my Amazon account from 2017, I might have bought 1,000 decks of cards. Like I bought them in bulk. I loved. I mean, I do magic tricks, and I would have a deck of cards in my back pocket at restaurants, games, clubs, wherever I was. There was a deck of cards with me at all times. I got so much joy, which is so irrational, out of playing cards and having a deck of cards in my hand. It's even weird now, like, my kid wants to play gin rummy with me, and I'll go to get a deck of cards, and there's that it's a brief moment where I do say to myself, wait, maybe I shouldn't play cards with my son. But my kids are so well aware of what I did and what I do to this day. I think you can sit down with your son and play, a certain type of card game with no stakes, obviously, and it's innocent fun. But man, I loved it. I do. And it's funny, like when you talk about gambling, even though gambling essentially robs me of everything in life, I'd be lying to you if I told you I only have bad memories of it. Like I have some of the best memories of my lifetime happen to be centered around gambling or your trips that were at casinos or experiences or things I was able to afford because I had a big win and suddenly, I'm flush with cash. So let's go to Italy. Let's fly private to California. Stupid stuff, but so I'm honest about that. I do have good memories. The bad outweigh the good, but I compartmentalize those as well.
For the addicts still hiding, still pretending, what do you want them to hear from you right now?
What I say every week on Hello, My Name is Craig. If I can overcome it, if I can live without gambling, if I can make good on a second opportunity at life, then anybody can. I am not special in that regard. Like I said, we all have a great commonality in the addictive part of this. The recovery part is all on you. It's unique. And if I've learned anything, it's that gambling was my everything. 24/7, 365. I was only concerned about gambling. And if someone can go from that, which I did, to not just a life without any gambling at all, but a productive life, a rewarding life, an honest life, a life to be proud of. I know it seems cliche. If I can do it, then everybody and anybody can do it. And I mean that. Like if you had said to me from 2015 to 17 that there's going to be a point in your life when you're not going to gamble, I would have drug tested you. There was no possibility that that could happen. That was off the table completely. Which is why when you counsel gamblers, you don't start off with you're never going to gamble again for the rest of your life. You start with small steps. Let's just get through the weekend. Let's get through tonight. And those are the building blocks of it.
When you think about the man your kids see today, what's something you hope they believe about their dad?
Great question. I wrote something down at one point when I was just in a mood to write that the way I compared it for my kids is that, I was their Superman and then Superman forgot how to fly. That's how I process this through my kids' eyes. The thing I hope the most about it, obviously that they don't gamble, but beyond that is low hanging fruit. I hope the valuable lesson that they learn is that whether it's self-inflicted or not, life's not always easy. There are going to be stumbling blocks and mountains, maybe sometimes glaciers that get in the way of your happiness, of your success, of the good times. And how you handle that will say a lot about you. And I hope as they get older and have relationships of their own and knock on wood one day, families of their own, that they'll look at me as what I am, a flawed person, which I am, but they'll respect the fact that I didn't succumb to it, that I never gave up, and that I chose to fight back and make something of my life. Because whether or not, and hopefully they'll never experience the depths of what I ever experienced, but life is a funny way of keeping you humble and keeping you honest and throwing things your way, whether you expect them or not, whether they're self-inflicted or not. And I hope that my sons, especially as grown men one day, will realize there's a right way to handle adversity. that this from playing football. It's one of my favorite lines I ever heard being around athletes like yourself for so long. And that is, they used to say that adversary, is that the right word? Adversary, right? Yeah. Adversary builds character. But the reality is it reveals character. And I love that quote because it's so true. You want to find out who a man really is, who a woman really is? Throw some shit in their way and see how they handle it. And and I hope that's the lesson my kids take from it. And I hope for my daughter's sake, because I do think, as much as this may sound sexist, just we're men and women are different. I hope that when my daughter finds a man and falls in love with him and wants to get married, that she seeks those good qualities out in the man she wants to spend the rest of her life with and knows better based on her experience as my daughter.
I'm sure your kids, when you first got in trouble and all that, just age wise, they probably didn't. Maybe your daughter, the oldest, maybe kind of fully understood. But has there been any of those conversations that kind of like aha moments, or did you have to shield any of it from the younger ones, and now you can talk openly about it? Or
Yeah, my little guy was least affected by it. He's 14 now. Um, my daughter, again, getting ready to turn 16, and then I was estranged from them and my wife for a period of time because of what I was going through in the legal case and all that, which was awful. So she carries that with her for sure. And then my second son really poured himself into football. He was a Division III running back at a small school in Iowa, and really took out whatever angst he had and anger he had on a football field, which was amazing for him. My oldest son, though, unfortunately, he bore the brunt of it because, my little guy at the time was 6 years old. My wife was working; she had a job, and I'm now estranged from my family. So my son, being the oldest boy in the house, had to take on father duties for my youngest son. And he went from I guess a 15-year-old kid or so, thereabouts 14, 15-year-old kid, with friends and all the social things you get to do at that age. And now all of a sudden his mom's telling him, you have to come right home after school to look after your brother. You can't go do the things that the other kids are doing because I need help at home. And one of the worst aspects of all of this is the pressure and responsibility that I put on my oldest son to really become a second father to my youngest son. The only good part of that is their bond today as a 14-year-old and 23-year-old is like thicker than thieves. And it's amazing to now see that bond and that, like, they're best friends. So imagine being a 23-year-old, your best friend is 14 and vice versa. And that's what came out of that. But in the moment, we had one, I don't want to get into it out of respect to him, but we had one moment, a few years ago where I sat down with him to talk, and my wife did as well. And he let it all out. And it was really cathartic for him. And I think when you're living in the moment, sometimes it's hard to see the forest for the trees, and you're doing the best you can. And the emotional weight and devastation that was put on these children, no fault of their own, I'm sure we'll be with them for the rest of their lives. And you just hope that they've figured out ways to cope with it and overcome it and put it wherever they need to put it, for whatever future experiences come their way. But it is, of all the bad things that came out of this, what I did to my children and my wife, and while we're great now and I'm blessed that I'm not divorced and we're married and I'm in my kids' lives and all that stuff, man, I don't take any of that for granted. Any of it. I'm in for all of it. Like my kids are like, I don't like leaving the house. If they got something going on, I am there for it.
yeah, I think all that stuff happens for a reason. Even like that bond you just spoke about, like that the 23-year-old and your 14-year-old, like that bond will be there long after you're gone. And
Yep.
like there's
Yep.
who knows. Obviously, there's some pain there too, but there's also some positives in everything. So
If you don't mind, Please brag about your family for a minute. I have to give a quick shout out to my family, Gregory Green, for connecting us through your mutual friend, Nick. So, Craig, what makes your heart fall when you look around the dinner table?
I do want to say this, Craig, too, for a second. He asked this to everybody, so you're not going to be the only guy that came on here and talked about how great their family is.
No, it's my best family moment, and we used to do it every day when the kids were younger. We don't do it as often, but we still do it, for major gatherings and get-togethers. We play a game called High Low, and you have to participate in it. You can't give one-word answers. Everybody gets to go, and it's everyone at the table. They share their high and their low from the week, the month, the day, whatever it is, but they got to open up and share. And they mock me for, am I right, for doing it? But it's a way to kind of get a glimpse into their lives. And I'm blessed still. My 23-year-old still lives at home. He's moving out in February. I love having him home. I love when my daughter decides that it's okay for her to come home and give us a day, which 25-year-old girls don't want to do all that often. But when I get all four of them home, and I'll have that like this weekend, I'll have all four of my kids under our roof at home. There's a lot of times I just kind of stop. They won't even notice or know it. And I just look around the table. And I mean, man, that's my Super Bowl, and I'm blessed that they're healthy. I'm blessed that, they can be at that table. Obviously not as often as I'd like them to be, but I also get that. I saw some quote the other day, like we as dads and parents, we spend 2 decades of our lives trying to raise our kids so that they can leave us. Right. And that's our job. I'm still having a tough time with the leaving part, but man, when I got all four of them at home, and there's nothing better, man. That's awesome. I love it.
Now on to our final word segment, where we ask our guests a few rapid fire questions. What was the happiest moment in your life?
When I got married.
What is the biggest adversity you've faced?
Being arrested and going to prison. That's a pretty obvious one. Yeah.
What are you most excited about?
Watching my kids have success in wherever their chosen fields are, and for them to find unadulterated love.
What advice would you give your younger self?
Not to gamble, and not to meet the one person you met that changed the course of your life from a negative.
Do you have any book recommendations for us or for the listeners?
Well, Tim wrote a book. I got to play nice to the host. I do. So Eric Larson's one of my favorite authors of all time. So any one of Eric Larson's book is a go-to for me. Love Eric Larson. I could give you 50 other books I read when I was away. Start with Eric Larson. Devil in the White City, Turn of the Century Chicago, and a serial killer. Awesome. So start with him and move on from there.
The name of our podcast is Nothing Left Unsaid. Do you have anything you want to say?
I can't possibly think that I do.
Got it all
I can't
out.
say it at all. I do want to say this. Like, I know you don't want to hear it, but you doing this, Tim and Troy, it's so inspirational and stands to, about who you were and who you are. And when the guys first told me that you had asked about me coming on, it was the quickest yes I've ever given. And I've watched your story play out, obviously from afar, but you got so many people pulling for you and rooting for you. And you're such an example that you've set of how to live with such amazing dignity, that I feel fortunate and blessed that you've asked me to join you here. I know we don't know each other. I think you and I may have even spoken once, maybe in a lifetime of broadcasting when you were doing games, but I do watch your story. I am moved by it, amazed by it, and obviously rooting for the best for not just you, but I know the impact it has on Troy, you guys, and the entire family. And you should be so proud of what it is that you're doing, because it does make a difference. And more people need to tell stories like yours so we have a better understanding of this disgusting disease and can one day, hopefully, eradicate it so future generations don't have to deal with it. But it's a privilege to be able to join you guys, even though I'm talking about myself. And I need you to know that I feel that way. My wife called earlier, and you may have heard me say I'm doing the interview. She was like, I'm so sorry. Like, she knows the story. And, we've participated a little bit, not a lot, in your medical community. with fundraising and storytelling. And I'm very moved by the strength you've shown and continue to show in your fight. And don't think that that strength has gone unnoticed, because it's noticed by a whole lot of people.
Yeah, it's awesome. I totally agree with you too. I say all the time, he's still the same warrior, just a different fight. At the end of every podcast, I ask all our guests, now that you kind of got to know us, you knew my dad already a little bit, but now that you got to know us, you got to see the show, what it's about. Who are a couple people that you know personally that you think we should have on to tell their story?
Oh, wow. To tell their story. I don't want to give you a flippant answer on that. So I want to give that some thought, because there are so many worthy stories to be told. Um, so I'm going to get back to you on that one, if that's okay.
Perfect. That
Yeah,
works.
and I will. Let me give you my phone number also, so you have it.
Thank you, Craig.
You're welcome.
Craig, thank you for the courage to speak where most would hide, for turning class into caution, and for reminding us that second chances are found. They're earned. You've shown us redemption is a daily discipline, that honesty is heavier than shame, but more freeing, and that the people who walk back into our lives often do so with deeper footsteps. May your story continue to help others find the words, the help, and the way home. Thank you for joining us today, and may God bless you and your family.
Well, thank you.